I have hit go live. You could just like start singing to me.
Happy birthday, Chris.
Birthday to me. And then I'm going to go.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Felicidades.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go check and see if we're live on the thing. You're now. I don't know if we're live yet. You could keep singing.
It says
Happy
live.
birthday to
There we're
you.
live. Definitely live.
Happy
I see us on Facebook. Yay for my birthday friends party.
Happy birthday, Chris.
What-
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Some people like to drink on their birthdays. Some people like to go online with Transgender Education for Trans Awareness Week on their birthday.
And some people do both.
Some people do both. I was about to say, this is a birthday situation.
I have friends who will actually do that with me. This is amazing. This is amazing. Thank you for being here. So the plan tonight is to laugh a lot and have a really good time. So that's
It's for you, Chris. I'm going to
you're
celebrate
drinking.
this.
You're drinking.
with
No, I thought we were doing sober tonight.
Okay.
So, all right, put it down, Deborah. We're good with bottles for all our friends in recovery. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you. So, I'm Chris Paige. I'm Mixed Chris Paige. I am the operations director for Transfaith. I am the publisher of Otherwise Engaged Publishing. And let's see, we're having one of our friends from Drew join us. I'm gonna, let's see. Woo, Golder, welcome back. So we have friends from Drew University also joining us. Transfaith is hosting. Golder and Rosie are here from the Drew University Diversity and Inclusion Committee, who are the folk who invited me to do this. So this is like all of my worlds colliding. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee are wonderful undergrads at Drew University, who I've been getting to know for a couple of months now. Yeah, those are folk at Drew too. This has been chaotic. I thought we were going to be on YouTube. I followed up that technology. Now we're on Facebook. And I'm muting you because you're opening chips or something. This is a party. This is a hoot. This is a hoot.
It's a party.
It's
a party.
Put it down, Deborah. Put it down.
I was actually lighting some white sage.
Excellent. Excellent.
So we've got some good energy coming in.
We do have good energy coming in. So let's see. Should I switch to speaker? No, we're gonna let you light that. I think we want to be together for the lighting of the sage.
Yes. So we are lit.
All perfectly choreographed.
Yes.
Rosie, do you want to say anything to introduce yourself? This is just completely out of control and we're just rolling with it.
I love it already. I love it already. Yeah, absolutely. I did see your email. I'm sorry, I'm kind of running in and out of places, but basically, my name is Rosie. I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at the undergrad level. I really just wanted to thank you all for coming out today. This is really amazing to be able to have all of you on this platform and present it in such a way that people can view it afterwards. Gianna Leese, who is the president of Diversity and Inclusion, wishes she could be here tonight, but unfortunately due to personal reasons, she cannot. But she definitely wanted me to express that she knows that we're going to have a very brilliant conversation. So really, that's it for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. So here's the setup. So we're doing all questions welcome. That doesn't mean we necessarily answer every question. We may get some questions and say, let's talk about this question and why it's problematic. Let's talk about why this question is something that we're going to talk around instead of into. And then other questions we're going to go into. So all questions are welcome, and then that will help us give all kinds of things to share about the nature of what it means to be trans and to get some of these kinds of questions. And so some of the folks that we expect to have watching this event maybe have no experience around trans folk. and maybe they read it in a book or they had a professor present about it, but they have not met like real live functioning in the world trans people, as 4 of us are on this call. And so that's part of what we want to talk about, just sort of like what it means, what some of these words mean, what this experience means. We have other folk who maybe have experience with trans folk, but they're like religion, spirituality, leadership. Like, I didn't know that trans people could do those kinds of things, right? I thought they were patients and clients and people to be managed and troublemakers or perhaps victims. And so we also are all theologically grounded folk and have experience in religion and spirituality. So the hope is to really kind of jump back and forth between some basic transgender kinds of educational stuff to let you know what it means to these different things, but also to get to that deeper level of spirit and talk about what our lives are actually like. So I'm gonna have our panelists introduce themselves, but I'm gonna wait until we first do a little 2-minute video. And so this is partly just to set the stage. And this is from the Gender Wheel. There's an author who created a children's curriculum called the Gender Wheel. And I haven't used it myself, but I'm told it's really wonderful, and I'm kind of in love with this video. It doesn't do academic language. It does not do activist language. It's just like, what does it mean to have these kinds of pronouns? And so that's what I'm going to share on the screen. I'm going to make it big. So it's called A Story About Pronouns, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
When you were born, you were given a name and a pronoun, probably he or she. As you get older and know yourself more and more on the inside, some of the ideas of she and he may fit you, and some of them may not. Ideas about he and she are very strong right now. Many people believe he means only certain things, and she means only certain things. These ideas affect what people think about everything: how you dress, how you wear your hair, or how you express the spirit of who you are, even what colors you like. People can think they know what your pronoun is based on their ideas about she and he. This is a way of only looking at the outside of a person and not the inside of a person. On the inside, you may not feel like he or she at all. Maybe they feel the most free, or you may feel like both she and he. But mostly, you probably just feel like yourself. This inside part is the most important part, because there is no one else like you in the world. This is why everyone should be free to be exactly who they are on the inside. Who you are is not always something you can put into words or explain. You just know who you are because you are. Pronouns can be a way to share how you feel on the inside. Because this inside part is the most important part of you, it cannot be about outside ideas of how people think she or he is supposed to act. It has to be about how you feel. The truth is, ideas about he and she change all the time. If they don't fit, you might be an important part of changing them. Only you know what pronouns express the spirit of who you are on the inside. The words from this video are from the back pages of the children's book They, She, He, Me, Free to Be. In it, pronouns are used as a familiar starting point for kids and grown-ups to expand ideas about gender and celebrate expression. Playing with Pronouns Educational Card Deck is designed to instill gender-inclusive practices while learning and playing games. There is pride in our pronouns. Let's play.
Let's play.
Let the games begin.
Isn't that the best? I'm just super happy about that video. So we want to transition to let our panelists introduce themselves. And who wants to go first? All right, Deborah. All right, Deborah.
Well, the guys were going to do it anyway. They were going to let me go first anyway. First of all, I am honored and humbled to be in the presence of all of you wonderful individuals, gifted individuals, and individuals whom I can call my friend. It's been a long time since I've seen you all, so I want to send warm love and wishes to all of you in your spaces and those who you interact with to continue to stay healthy, continue to have smiles on your face, and continue to make a difference in the space in where you occupy. To my dear friend, Chris, it is a happy birthday to you. May you have many more healthy, prosperous, and glowing moments to celebrate another year. I am so happy for you. Continue to celebrate, Chris, who you are. I'm Reverend Debra Hopkins. I am the founding pastor of an online ministry called Essentials for Life Ministries. I started that ministry some 4 years ago, which was to combat the problem that many within the LGBT community were having with the established church houses. And I gave it a platform where they could continue to express and exercise and feel free to express their spirituality in the manner that they saw fit. But at the same time, I still was going to, in the form of writing messages from God about hope, love, promise, and I do talk about sin as well. So I don't leave anything out. I don't sugarcoat who God is, but I give them a freedom platform, and I'm grateful to be able to do that. I'm also the founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization that I founded 3 years ago here in Charlotte called There's Still Hope. It is designed to provide, well, it's moved from emergency temporary shelter to a now transitional shelter for transgender adults who find themselves homeless. And I can proudly say that we have worked with roughly about 28 different trans people here in the city of Charlotte. I didn't know that there were that many here. But in that process, we've been able to help, by the end of December of this year, 9 individuals not only find permanent housing, but also employment. And so our program has been working. Transfaith and Chris and the entire team has been very supportive with me in how I go about doing the work that I do here in Charlotte. And I just ask you guys to continue to keep us in prayer.
Fantastic.
Mouthful.
Woo, 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 woo. And we really want to do a full introduction. So can you give us just a couple of minutes talking about how did you become Deborah? What does it mean for you to be Deborah? And that's not just like what people usually expect in terms of transition stories, but like, how does spirit work in your life? Like we're not doing a whole hour sermon, right? But you know, you gotta be careful with preachers, but do give us a little bit of, by way of introduction of like, how has spirit or God or ancestors, however you phrase such things, how have they helped to shape you?
Early on as a child, thank you, Chris. Early on as a child, I was wrestling, feeling isolated, feeling lost and confused. I think around about the age of 12, I began to really start to recognize that this male thing about me just didn't jive. Yeah, I ran track and played childhood sports like football and baseball and tried to play basketball and all of these things. They didn't gel with me. But the Spirit continued to speak to me about the elements of what I was and what I wasn't. And as I began to continue to mature and understand some things, that maturity really came into being when I had a brief conversation with the late Christina Jorgensen. She was at a book signing and I happened to go to that book signing and she whispered into my ear to explore the internet, but be all that you can be. And I wrote a little bit about this in my book, Not Until You Have Walked in My Shoes, which is on Amazon, everybody. You can get a copy to be able to find out more about this life and this journey. But it was at that point where it led me closer to understanding who I was and to begin to express who I was. But at the same time, I had already gone into ministry. I had gone into ministry, and strange as it may sound, I was in seminary school before I began my transition. But I also knew that there was something that just wasn't right. And I wrestled with it for a long time. And believe it or not, even after my transition, I continued to wrestle with it, because it was the concept of what the world around me was saying and conveying, what the Spirit was speaking to me about, and what I was learning from a biblical aspect of things, which really played havoc. And I'm going to leave it right there, because I want Chris to be able to have an opportunity to have some more questions to dive deeper into that platform.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Who wants to go next to give us not just bio? We want to go a little bit beyond the bio and say what's on the inside, as the video suggested. Z, you want to go next? No, we got you on. I muted you so that we'd be quiet for Deborah. So there you go. There you go.
I really appreciated that short, because I think that's, so I'm Z, and I am the co-founder of an organization called TAG, the Transgender Allies Group, out of Reno, Nevada, who's also done a lot of things in legislation and bill writing. So I got my start, I'm a former Marine, so I got my start fighting Don't Ask, Don't Tell after my honorable discharge, which has come full circle these days. I think for me, that video really hits hard because of a conversation that I was having with another person who needed some understanding and how to help their trans employees and non-binary, specifically non-binary folks that are under their employ. And one of the questions that I felt would help them get further along was, who is the person you talk to the most, and who is the person that you have to love the most in your life? And his response was his wife. And I said, no. And he looked at me very perplexed, like, well, I said, you, because we talk to ourselves the most, and we have to love ourselves the most at the end of the day. So making, it's always posed to us as trans folks that we make a choice to be trans. But I say we make a decision to honor ourselves in the conversations that we have and the love that we have for ourselves. And the way that I got to be Z is my initials were AZZ, and my name is indigenous because I am of Mesoamerican Mayan descent. And no one could pronounce, of course, my indigenous name, so they just shortened it to AZ. And by the middle of me going into the Marine Corps, it just kind of got down to Z. And I asked my mother, it was just a nickname, but I asked my stepmom, who was my mom, what she would name me if she had the opportunity to. And she said, well, you're Z. And by the time that I'd gotten to that point in my transition, she was like, you're going to figure out that means a lot more than what it already does. And here we are years later, Z is a pronoun, right? So it was just a really amazing thing for me to grow into my name, right? My name chose me and I grew into it. And I think the way that I really got on this journey is by travel. I learned about myself being a Navy brat and being in the Marine Corps myself, and then the travels as an adult. I learned so much about myself through my travels and those that I interact with and the places that I'm at. I'm going through a whole new journey here in Tennessee. So I think the way that we become ourselves is our journey that never ends. And I'm actually very thankful for it.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Okay. Last but not least.
Hello, everyone. Deborah Z, you all are tough acts to follow. My name is Delfin or delfin. My pronouns are they and them. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, currently living in Athens, Ohio, where I am a founder / board member of the Southeastern Ohio Rainbow Alliance, which looks to raise queer narratives and queer voices in Southeast Ohio, as well as in Appalachia. And I'm also a Vision Council member or board member for the Catholic group Call to Action. And don't know where to start. Growing up in a Latinx household, growing up in a Catholic household, very early on, I learned that being different was not welcome and being different was bad. I knew from a very early age, I really do want to say 3 or 4, that I was different from other kids, but I didn't have a language or a way of expressing that, understanding that. And then again, being in a household and part of a culture and part of a religion where difference was often squashed rather than lifted up and celebrated. And so growing up, I didn't pay attention to anything around gender or sexuality. I did enter the seminary. I was in Jesuit seminary for a year. And during my month-long silent retreat, when you're in silence for a month, things have a tendency to come up and out. And both literally and metaphorically and spiritually. And that is where I came out. But I only came out as a gay person because it was the only word that I knew. And I knew that it was bad. But even when adopting that word, it didn't fit and didn't click, but I didn't know anything else. I was also living in the Dominican Republic at the time, and so resources were very limited in terms of sexuality and gender diversity. And so upon coming back to the United States, I ultimately left the seminary. It began a journey, one of trying to find my place within Christianity and within the religious world, as well as finding language and words that reflected me. And so it wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I came out as a trans person, specifically as a genderqueer or as a two-spirit person, because I started to learn language and I was like, oh my gosh, there are all these words and there are all these terms. WTF. I actually said the various expletives, but for the sake of the panel, won't go into them. But in a good celebratory way, not in a bad way. And just began to really wrestle and sit with, and we can talk more about this in Q&A, what does it mean to be created in the diversity of God, not just in the image of God, but what does it mean to be created in the diversity of a goddess that is so vast and confusing and mysterious, and I am somehow a reflection of that. What does it mean to be that as a Latinx person? And how do I reclaim my roots as a Hispanic and Latinx person, being able to delve into gender narratives that are within Latin America that I was not raised with or exposed to, as well as how to do that within religion, not just within Catholicism and Christianity as a whole, but looking at religion and reclaiming narratives and finding that, oh my gosh, I mean, maybe they're not using the term transgender, but how this story is written or how the sacred text is explained, that's me. I'm in there somehow. And that has been a really powerful and confusing journey, but it ultimately has been very liberating. Not to say that I haven't had my share of hardships and challenges, but have been very excited to find a lot of wholizing aspects to the trans journey, in terms of folks like tonight who have been part of my journey, as well as other folks who share who they are, and it helps make sense and or adds a question that we wrestle with as we wrestle with who we are and live into who we are.
Oh my goodness, this is so great already. I don't even want to show the video. I just want to poke and prod and do things, but I'm going to show the next video. This will be the let's go ahead and do the video. And so this is to talk about pronouns because we really want to give people a grounding in sort of how to be with trans and non-binary folk. And I think this is an important part of it. This is a video from the Union for Reform Judaism. And Delphin, you did an awesome segue into it when you talked about the Imago Dei. Oh, I need sound when I do it. I need sound. It won't be nearly as much fun without sound. There we go. All right, here we go.
Hey everyone. Today we're going to be talking about pronouns. Pronouns? What are those? Well, pronouns are the words that we use to describe someone in the third person. Why do I have to care about pronouns? I can just look at someone and know what pronouns they use. Well, actually, you shouldn't assume someone's pronouns or gender. Someone that presents more femininely, such as by wearing makeup or a dress, might actually use he, him pronouns. Some people don't use he, him, or she, her pronouns and instead use they, them pronouns. Some people use a mix of pronouns. Wait, they, them? I thought that's only used for talking about a lot of people at once. That's not actually quite true. William Shakespeare actually used it in some of his plays. But I'm a man and I use he, him pronouns because that's what I've always used. A lot of cisgendered people, which are people who identify with the gender they were given at birth, don't really question their pronouns or gender. Questioning gender can be scary. Remember, in Judaism, we're created b'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. And I know that we use that text a lot, but in this case, it's really true. If you use your pronouns in a room full of strangers, then I feel a bit safer using my pronouns. Okay, so what pronouns do you use? Thank you so much for asking. I use they, them, and sometimes she, her pronouns. Really? I never would have known that if I hadn't asked. Let's practice using they, them pronouns. We use the name Elias as an example. Okay. Elias went to the store. They got the ingredients to make a challah. Great. Elias got the eggs and the flour and the yeast, and then he went to the cash register. Oh, darn it. I messed up. This is hard. I don't want to do this anymore. No, it's okay. Messing up is completely natural. It can be a little bit difficult for people to make the switch. Why don't we try practicing the apology? Okay. I'm so sorry I used the wrong pronouns. Please forgive me. I'll do anything, please. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I understand where you're coming from, but it's really not that big of a deal if it wasn't done with the intention of trying to make the other person feel bad. Try it again, but this time keep it casual. Okay. I'm sorry I used your wrong pronouns. Thank you. Another word that we use is misgendering. I'm sorry I misgendered you. There you go. Also, look what I've got. Whoa! How'd you do that? I have my ways. Want to break bread together? I'd like that. Thank you so much for helping to educate me. And now, you have the ability to help educate others. Introduce yourself using your name and pronouns, and be comfortable asking people's pronouns. I will.
Yay for humor and making mistakes. That's, in addition to the theological content, I just think, you know, sometimes we get so anxious, especially about people and things and experiences that we don't necessarily understand. And so I love how that breaks it down a little bit into just like, it's a relationship, and like being in relationship is what matters. Do any of you want to sort of respond or riff off of that video for folk who are thinking about this maybe for the first time and trying to sort it out?
Chris, I've used both of these two short video clips that you have shown the audience tonight. And on this Thursday night, here in North Carolina, PBS is airing a piece called Proper Pronouns, where I and 3 other of my colleagues are a part of this discussion on not only our journey and our lives like we are tonight, but on the subject of using proper pronouns. And, you know, from a spiritual aspect, in my early years, I saw God, I was taught God in the gender format, male, he, him. And as time has moved on, and I feel that as I have matured in the work of ministry and the understanding of scripture and understanding who our creator is, Chris, you said it perfectly, that many of us see not only ourselves, but we also see God or the creator in the image of what and how we see oneself in many respects. And for me in particular, because there's such a long history within ministry, God is a he to me, but there are times when I speak of God in terms of she, her, and I share with the audience today, I share with a lot of individuals, there's a book and a film that is out called The Shack. I forgot the name of the author. But what I love about that particular film and that book is that God is described in the triune format, but identified as much of the world sees society today. And so if I wanted to see a transgender individual in that clip, I can, because I'm looking at this piece and how it's told so vividly to give people a different platform and different perspective as to how they see the creator, and better, and which enables that individual or the individuals to be able to have a much deeper understanding and a better relationship with the creator, however we see the creator.
Delfin, you said something about goddess in your introduction. Do you want to chime in?
Yes.
Yeah.
A few things that are being sparked in me. One is, before getting to goddess, is, and both videos talk about this, and it really resonates with me, that how we present in the world isn't always a reflection of who we are, and how we present in the world may be based on issues around safety, how out we are, how comfortable we are. And so I primarily present how I am right now when I was working at a university campus, because this was safer, but not a reflection of who I am. And there were times where I did wear more feminine clothing, but noticed that I wasn't treated with the same level of respect. I was seen as a joke. I was seen as being a clown of sorts. And so professionally, wearing a t-shirt and jeans gave me access than wearing a tie and a long skirt, let's say. And so looking at, when it comes to trans folk, that how we present in the world and how we express ourselves isn't always a reflection of who we are, which is why we should always ask and not assume. With that, it is expanding our God language. And as Deborah shared, for a long time, similarly, God was a male and God was father. And that's very comforting. But growing up in a single parent household where it was just my mom, and my mom was both mother and father, it was hard to relate to that image of God solely being a father. And more recently, started to adopt not just gender neutral language for God, but why can't we talk about goddess and God as feminine or as mother? Why can't we refer to God as Z or as y'all or as per? And sit with that and reflect over that. And so more and more I've started to say goddess, and it really throws people off. What's fascinating is that people are like, oh, God doesn't have a gender. And I was like, well, then let's use a female version of God and refer to God to goddess. And then they freak out. It's like, well, you're contradicting yourself. And let's sit with that contradiction and figure it out and sort it out. But I've been referring, like, even with my family, and I think they freak out. I was like, oh, goddess knows what she does, and goddess provides. And I'm not trying to appropriate paganism or anything like that, but just sort of to expand our God language so that we can also then expand how we engage people when it comes to language.
So you want to chime in, or we have I think we have a question coming, if you want to go.
Yeah, I think I want to speak to 2 points, because my journey has been a long one. And I find it funny that the language and tone is a lot in the Western Christian world, right? But there's so much more outside of the Western Christian world. But to speak to the Western Christian world, what I find very interesting is that understanding that God is omnipotent, God is all things, yet God can't be all things because God has to be a he, right? How we take away from God by our language, putting them in a box, right? Even depending on what version of Genesis, right? Because there's 2 Genesis recounts and several different language and translations, right? Wherein they use they, right? But folks don't want to delve deep into what that they means, or that they could mean just that they are they, right? Not just 3, but they in and of themselves. So I find it interesting that God is still reduced, right? We still have a reduction of omnipotence, and we can, even though we say the words that God is everything, we still have a block that God can't possibly also be everything, right? Which includes gender and sexuality and identity. Where I landed is I started with our great friend, Reverend Liam Hooper. In my interactions with him, he used divinity. And it helped me get like a kind of a neutral place for me to start to get off from he, him as God, or even binary she, her, and into this more this place that fits more with me as an indigenous person of indigenous spirituality, because even they didn't hit right for me. But when I started using spirit ancestor, that hit right in my spirit and soul. And when I started using that language and calling spirit ancestor, separating or having them together depending on the conversation, I also realized that I was in that I'm co-creating with spirit ancestor, that not only do I have ancestor, I am ancestor. And that then it drew me in to this world where I can understand and be myself, and understand that I am exactly in the likeness of my divinity because I am my divinity, right? And I think we lose that a lot because we're looking at this like we're looking up and they're looking down, when actually they're sitting right next to me. And I think that's where, for me, I got more connected and more grounded, and could start to not be afraid of who they are, and started to really enjoy exploring what divinity is and who they are to me and in my life.
Chris, let me come back in just a second. I've been talking to many, especially our young voters, or individuals who are eligible to vote, to get out and vote. And I've often talked about the platform of them being on the streets and marching and demonstrating and all of this good stuff. But I also reminded them, I said, you need to know what it is that you are marching for and up against. And I reminded them, like any soldier who goes into battle, they go into battle knowing what they are fighting. Here in the Western culture, we are wrestling with a system that is continuing to be problematic in the way we think, the way we see, and the way we act and respond. And it falls right into the bedrock of one's faith walk and their relationship with the Creator. However, we choose to express our relationship with this being. And many who have been so embedded into this structure, this system that has continued to say male, female, boy, girl, him, her, continue to teach it in the classrooms today, or to continue to say that God is he, and that's the only way that we can see God, is what we are trying to, which has become so radical of the change that many are wrestling with and having difficulties with when they listen to people like us.
A friend of mine sent out a text message thread asking for prayers, and I really appreciated how she phrased it. She put, if you pray, please ask God / goddess / and then in some Spanish speaking circles, we're starting to use X as an ending. We don't know necessarily how to pronounce it, but it looks really cool in writing. And she put Godex, Godex, and just thought that was really powerful, sort of speaking to Deborah's point of sort of expanding and dismantling this binary and taking, as Z said, taking God out of a box and letting God be God.
Yeah.
Ooh, we're really going there, aren't we? This is awesome.
Yeah, if God is supposed to be omnipotent and omnipresent, how the individual sees and is truly allowed to express should be given that freedom. And I think that that's what we're trying to say here. We have the freedom. You have the freedom to express in the beauty. And this is, when you see Deborah, you've seen the fullness of God in many, many respects. Oh no, I can't do some of the things that God has done, but through me, God can do great things. But you see the awesomeness of what God looks like. I go back to scripture. God says he created us in his image and in their likeness. And so when I look at the different faces, young and old, rich or poor, I see that creator, which is beautiful. And it just lets me know that, you know, the using the proper pronoun is important, but in certain spaces, it's irrelevant. It doesn't even have a space or is it even needed.
So I think this is actually a decent time, Rosie, to come back to this other one of the questions that came in through our online forum that I think we'll touch on some of these themes and maybe be a mild challenge that you can respond to.
Absolutely. Okay, so the question as written says, could you explain the differences between non-binary, gender fluid, and gender queer? Also, what are some theological responses to an unaffirming family who say your dead name was written in the book of life? God didn't choose this new one.
So first, what's a dead name? Because not everybody knows what that is, and then, you know, the substance of that. How does that go?
I'm going to speak to the dead name. The dead name really is the name that you were given at birth, changed to express who and what you are today and how you express today. Our name is, according to the Christian scriptures, God says that our name is either written in the Lamb's Book of Life or not. And many who push against the LGBT community, the T community in particular, when we transition and we change from that birth name, that given name for most of us, because most of us do, some of us continue to keep the name that we were given at birth. But for many of us, we have transitioned to an entirely new name. I kept my family's last name, but I did change my first name. But my name is still etched in the Lamb's Book of Life because it has nothing to do with my name, so to speak. It has everything to do with the person and how I move about in my life as God has led me to do so. And so when they talk about that dead name, they're speaking about that name that you were given at birth, but for those who chose to change it to carry on what their new name is today is what they're referring to.
With names, I think it's an invitation to recognize, and Z touched on this, that creation is something that is, not was, and is dynamic and ongoing. And so part of that is lived out in our names. And as Deborah shared, some folks do change their name. Some of us reclaim our names. In my case, I'm technically Junior. I'm named after my biological father, and I honor that. But it's been also an opportunity to delve into the various meanings of my name, not just looking at it as a literal translation from Spanish to English of dolphin, but in some cases, if you change the N to a C, it means strange and unusual. And I'm okay with that because I'm a little strange and unusual. It's also the name of a flower. And so being able to claim and reclaim my name on my terms as a way of honoring that creation is, and that book of life is also part of the creation and changing and reflecting who we are as people. Again, we're invited to be co-creators with the divine, recognizing again that creation is, not was. I'm not sure if Z wants to touch on that. We can also touch on the first part of the question.
So I'd like to pose two questions, right? One to speak to the person who's really seeking help in how to deal with their family. You know, if we go to the New Testament, right? And I always wonder why folks dismiss this, but once a person, right, Paul and Saul, right? How many disciples don't have their dead name, the name they were given by whoever gave it to them, right? But yet we just kind of like, oh, well, that just happened. Well, right, but that still happens, right? And it was a part of their journey, right? They left their old life and for them went into Christ and they were this new rebirth person, which had a new name, right? So that's kind of the simplistic scriptural, you know, one way to tackle what a name is. But one of the questions that I've been posing here recently in my journey, as we talk about dead names and ask people and folks say, well, what should my name be? I wondered, because I never did until a few months ago, what does my divinity call me? Because when we talk about a name, your parents gave you your name, or they gave you your grandmother's name, or you're named after a legacy, right? Somebody who meant a lot to your family or was cool, or right? Like some people, their name wasn't even given a thought, right? Like how many BBs do we know because they were named for baby boy because we didn't know what to call you, right? But what I'm more interested in this leg of my journey is, what does spirit ancestor call me? And how do I connect with them on that deeper level to find that out? Not that it matters to anyone else other than my connection with my divinity. But is that something that we also think about when we go to change our names? Is that a thing? Like, do we just pray about what should my name be? Or do we pray, what do you call me? Because they have a name for us. But how do we make that connection? And how many times people, if I just said, you know, hey, Mr. Paige, I'd like to be called Red for now, right? Okay, or how many sport, you know, they call me, you know, this, that, or the other because of some funny thing I did in high school, or right. So then that nickname overtakes the name. They're like, oh, I don't even know what his name is. I just know him as Red, right? And how respectful society is to nicknames and to other types of, you know, we call our kids different things when they grow up, right? Which isn't their name. So I think that we put a lot of stock in something that truly matters to us only because of our connection with our identity, but not in that it really does mean that much that we shouldn't respect it, but we should respect it on a different level, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let me, Z, and I love your questions. But let me back up for just a second, because I'm listening to the viewer's question as well. And I don't want to dismiss them completely, but you touched on part of it in the first question. Because if we look at names and the dismissed name, let's go to the Bible in the book of Acts, where Saul, who was is a dead name in respect, a past name, and what was associated with the name of Saul was Saul's behavior. If you study Saul's behavior, what Saul was doing to the followers of Christ at that time in the early stages of the first church, of the first Christianity, the foundation of Christianity, and his journey on the road to Damascus, when he was transformed and given a new name. He now has a dead name of one, and he now has a new name. And in that new name is how I also operate. I chose my new name to operate, not only to honor a very close childhood friend of mine who had drowned. I was with her the day that she drowned. Both of us couldn't swim. She accidentally slipped into the lake, and I couldn't do anything but scream and holler and try to reach for her. But Deborah was close to me, and I thought that she was my soulmate in many respects. I loved her dearly, but we were children. We were young children. We didn't love that kind of, no, we were just good old-fashioned friends. But I learned that, yeah, she was really, would have been my soulmate. And I learned that as I was transitioning in my late 30s, is when it took place, this transition. Here I'm transitioning, and one of the things that came out was the chosen name. And I wanted to pick a name that I could honor and give homage to, give respect to, a name that would have meaning and purpose, so that I can continue to move on in that name to make a difference in the world, continue to preach the gospel in a way that would touch the hearts and minds of individuals, and to be able to have conversations with families, especially people of color, like within my community, where transitioning, being gay or lesbian or what have you, is somewhat taboo in many respects, coming up in my circle, to be able to have a conversation with them about, well, if you profess to be a follower of the Creator, if you profess to be one that you said at my birth that you love me, does this love have conditions to it? Because you don't accept every decision or choice that I've made? Do you love me? When we're having these conversations with family members, that dead name really has no place. If you feel that your new given name or your chosen name has a purpose, and you chose it with purpose, then live and walk in that purpose. In having conversations with family members or friends, you have to come at them with, first of all, knowing, first of all, who you are. When you find out who you are and you can hold your head up and walk firmly and boldly in who you are, now you can have these conversations. They may not be able to understand them all. You may have to give them some literature. You may even have to show them a couple of these videos that you saw tonight. But it's a starting point to have conversation, and you start with the Bible. In the 13th chapter of the Christian book of 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about love, love, love. And if anybody says who wants to follow some kind of faith platform, say that they love me, but hate what it is, we're going to have a problem. Because, listen, we can talk about what you don't like about me, but don't let us be separated because you don't like what I'm doing or what I've done or how I've become. Because I'm just like you. I'm a vessel here on a sinful earth. And I'm going to give you guys on a sinful earth that we must learn to move forward in. So learn scripture, go to scripture, because a lot of us are still surface scripture readers and understanding surface scripture. And I tell people all the time, get the shovel out. start to dig deeper. Because when you start to dig deeper, you'll see us all up and down the scriptures. And I start with the first chapter of the Bible, of the Christian Bible. Let us make mankind in our own image and in our own likeness. And when I see whether it's male, female, gay, or lesbian, I'm seeing the image of the Creator.
If this is too much for the person who asked the question for their family to take in, yeah. I'm mindful, and it sucks to be honest, that it is a process and a journey, and that we often have to be the patient ones while others are playing catch up. And so it's not to say that it's hopeless, and I also don't want to give false hope, but just as we are living our journeys of transition and affirmation, our families are also living that journey, and they may be at a different point in the journey, and we just have to be patient as they catch up to where we are. Hopefully a family is able to embrace the name and pronoun, but they may struggle, and just sort of honoring their journey of understanding and living into who they are. One of the things that has been helpful for me is with the times that I have gone back to Miami or interact with my family who refer to me as he, and it's all male language, is having a community of support that I can turn to not undo the hurt, but to affirm me and help me stay in that moment with my family. And so taking an extended bathroom break, and sending a text message to folks like, I need affirmation, and folks, will refer to me as they, and give me support in that moment. And so if your family is a little resistant, finding a community of folks, ideally in person, but given everything that's happening with the pandemic, that may be a little challenging, but perhaps even just virtually, who affirm and celebrate you and can help you recharge in order to continue to deal with one's family. And again, we have to be patient, not pushovers, but we do need to be patient.
This opens up, Delfin, this opens up a challenge that I face in terms of how people imagine us, like how people imagine our lives. And on the one hand, I feel like people would look at this panel and go like, what incredible people, nothing phases them, they can handle anything. Look, you can be misgendered by your family, it's no big deal. Like, this is what trans people should really be like. This is what trans people should be like. They shouldn't be so sensitive, they should be able to handle it. Right? You're superstars, rock stars. The other thing that I hear people imagine about us is, oh, they're so broken, they're so fragile, that, you just have to, they blow up. I did the wrong pronoun once and boom, like, it's so difficult to deal with these people, or they're so pitiful, right? They're so sad and broken and all these things. And so I wonder if you would all, say something about your own experience, not just like whether you're a superstar, whether you're broken, right? But like to kind of break down, what does it cost? What does it cost to engage with a world that doesn't, what's the impact?
I'll go last.
Deborah's going to go last. Okay. She's a closer. She's a closer. So
they've heard my voice. They've already heard my voice a lot. I'm going to let the rest of them speak. I'll go last.
Yeah, I think you can.
I think for me, and I know that Reverend Hopkins and Mr. Paige have heard this from me a lot, is that my ministry is in my mess. My mess is my ministry. And I'm a really good looking hot mess. But that's because my life and my journey has not been easy. I'm going through a certain journey right now in which I'm being reminded of the beginning of my journey of 20 years ago, and looking at it differently now, And even I look back at that guy and say, wow, how did you make it past? Like, I thank that human being every day, because that human being survived everything to make it to where we are right now. And I see it as different versions of me in my journeys, which hopefully just continue to get better. And it certainly wasn't easy. And I remember one of my friends giving me encouragement and saying, you had to hide every day. And you had slipped up one day, and the fear in your eyes, I will never, the fear that I saw in your eyes when you slipped up about your partner, that was blazed into my brain, and I'll never forget it. Because we live through those moments, and that's where people can see us as broken. That's where people can see us as, as messes. And then when we get through those to the other side, that's when people see us as the rock stars, right? And I hate to say that we have to go through both. Unfortunately, most of us have. I wish for it to not be the reality, but a lot of us have gone through a lot of heartache and heartbreak and hardship. Reverend Hopkins and I have a very similar story in our lives, and how we got to be to the people that we are today. But I think that speaks to the resiliency of us as people, and how we talk to ourselves and love ourselves. We are still here because at first we continue to choose to love ourselves and make the decisions every day that try our best to honor that. And that's how I've gotten through it. And then we recognize when we don't love ourselves, right? And then we adjust. But I think at the end of the day, I know that my spirit ancestor is with me, and I have to be with me to be with them. And then anything else past that is something that I make decisions on and pray and discern every day about.
And that the challenges and hardship and difficulties are always going to be there. We've gotten through them, and we will face and endure and get through others. I shared with the group earlier that oftentimes, for a long time in my life, there was always the focus on oppression, like, oh, we need to look at dynamics of internalized oppression. And, when we talk about ableism, we also talking about racism. And that's important and needs to be honored and needs to be part of the conversation. But we also need to talk about internalized resilience and how folks are badasses and embracing their internalized badassery, even in something as simple, in my case, just getting out of bed. As a person who lives with depression, getting out of bed is sometimes very hard for a variety of different reasons. And folks are like, oh, what's the big deal? Well, for me, it's a big deal, the fact that I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, and stepped outside. May not have washed my face, but at least I'm standing outside. And recognizing those small feats as triumphs to be celebrated, as well as addressing the other things and hardship and what leads to depression and things of that nature. And so more and more, it's being able to hold both the challenge and the oppression and the hardship, along with the resilience and celebration, and having those two things together. Ultimately, recognizing us as whole people. And yes, we all are rock stars, but we're ongoing rock stars. It just doesn't, we reached a point and that's it. We continue to evolve, we continue to grow. Again, as I shared earlier, creation it is. In our journeys of transition, and a friend of mine introduced the term affirmation. He prefers affirmation to transition. We're constantly affirming who we are and living into our wholeness and expressing our wholeness. And so we never stop transitioning, we never stop affirming. But some days it is hard. And, there are days when I get mispronounced that God help the person who misgendered me, because I just unleash it. And other times it's like, thank you for my Chipotle. Now I go, because I don't want to have to deal with all of that stuff. And so it is, again, celebrating and recognizing our resiliency, but also holding our hardship and holding those things together.
Wow. I should have went first. You know, as children, we're always taught in the story to ask ourselves, who are we? And in that journey, we continue to ask ourselves that very question. I tell people in my walk today and the conversations that I have, that I want you to pay attention to something very carefully. You are going to become like me one day. This coming June, I'll hit 65 years of age. And the journey has been nothing but a roller coaster of challenges, highs, and many lows. I struggle constantly with this thing called depression. And I shared in my book that one of the things that I had to discover was how to combat this demonic spirit of depression. And there were two elements, well, there are four elements that really play into it. My relationship with the Creator, my ability to embrace music, my ability to be able to go to my knees and ask for strength and guidance, and the ability to sit down and just write what I'm thinking and feeling. When I take these four elements and apply them to being involved in whatever it is that I'm doing, it allows me to escape these valleys of lows and struggles and challenges when family members don't want to be a part of you. I'm living a life today where I don't have an intimate relationship with my 3 adult children. I don't have an intimate relationship on an ongoing basis with my 8 grandchildren. These are very low points for me, that in my quietness of nothing, that depression will sit in and these thoughts will race through my mind. And I struggle with them just like any other person who struggles with, well, family members can't get my name right or can't accept me for who I identify with. I've learned how to climb those ladders and understand that not everybody's going to accept everything about me. But I had to start by asking the question of a sermon that I preached way back in the 1980s. Look in the mirror. And I keep asking myself still that today. Who am I when I look in the mirror? I'm awesome. I'm great. I'm powerful. I'm strong. I'm weak. I'm stupid. I'm silly. I'm loving. I'm happy. I'm down. But I embrace it all because it encompasses all of who I am, all of who we are. And when we can embrace self, in a way that we find acceptance, because in order for others to accept you, you have to start with accepting yourself, the good and the bad. I work at it every day. I work on my hair every day. I work on my face every day. I work on my figure every single day. People think that I work out in some gym. Well, I don't work out in the gym, but I'm still okay. And I'm proud because it's a process that we have to do each and every day. But the journey it's not always on the high level and it's not always low. It's where we are in that moment and how we take those moments and make them our own in terms of being victorious. All right, I'm going to be quiet. Hold your head up high is what they used to say. Because I walk with my head hung low a lot. Those who know me, I'm always walking with my head held low. My dad used to say, always walk with your head held high. Always walk with your head held high. And I do it physically, spiritually, and mentally. And that's what I ask the viewer to continue to do as well. because we're going to have those moments when we're not going to be all that and we're not going to feel ourselves. But know that you are loved and there is support around you.
Thank you all. Thank you. That was deep. And I really want to spend so much more time. I'm also aware that we're like 20 minutes from our scheduled close already. We haven't even done terms. So I just want to sort of popcorn a little bit. I'm going to share, and here we go. This is from Thrive. And I like it because it doesn't focus on all these academic terms, right? I remember, Z, you mentioned sexual orientation. We had the question about gender fluid and gender queer. But I like this because it gets at the concepts. And I feel like often people get distracted by having the right word for the right thing. If you're going to major in gender studies, then you need to figure out the terms. If you're going to lead activism, you might need to figure out the terms. But if you're just trying to figure out your family members, the concepts are actually more important. And so this first category is like the brain, right? Is who are you? That's the inside from the first video that we had today. Your body is what people like to ask questions about a lot of times. We didn't actually get any questions tonight about body parts. But we all do have bodies. Sometimes the conversation even gets so intellectual, right, about gender, but we all have bodies, and all of these traumas and challenges that we face land in our bodies. And so that's an important part of it. So gender identity is what people often talk about for this who are you in your brain. Often when we talk about bodies, people are talking about sex, and that there's more than two kinds of bodies, right? That's a whole other webinar. There's more than two kinds of bodies. I'll leave it at that. And then some of what's been talked about tonight is your expression. Sometimes it's gender expression. Sometimes, and so that gets into gender. Well, it's all connected in gender fluid and gender queer. But so your expression is what you wear, and your behavior, and your clothing, and your hair, how you express yourself in the world. And then this word sexual orientation that was used earlier, this is a handout that's used for kids. And again, I like how it just, like, when stuff is designed for kids, it bypasses some of the complexity that even grown-ups get confused by, right? So sweetheart love, because kids aren't talking about all the different adult things you might say about sexual orientation. But sweetheart love is who you love. What's your affectional preference? Who you're romantically interested in? And then every one of these categories then can have hundreds and thousands of terms. In Otherwise Christian 2, which is a book where you can find articles by me, Delphin, Deborah, and Z. Otherwise Christian Stories of Resistance came out in, I think, March of this year. And so it's an anthology with 29 different transgender, intersex, non-binary, and two-spirit folks, making connection with Christian tradition, specifically. Oh, I did the ad and I forgot where I was going with that. Sweetheart, somebody save me. I don't know. I was saying maybe I just needed to do the advertisement. I think there was an original point. I was talking about sweetheart love, affectional preference. There's lots of different ways that people can be around these terms. I think that's the most important thing at that point. And so there's other, there's genderbread people and unicorns and other stuff that uses more of the academic and activist terms. Some of them have problematic histories. Some of them don't do right by our intersex siblings, like act like there's 3 different kinds of bodies when there's all kinds of spectrums about how our bodies are shaped and how they grow as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Does anybody want to talk, Delphin, do you want to talk about gender fluid, or do you want to come back to those terms a little bit?
Sure, and one of the realities when it comes to any of these terms is that there are 100 different understandings and definitions, even just with one term. And that is both beautiful and confusing. And
can I remembered? Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
In the introduction to Otherwise Christian 2, that's where I was going with that. In the introduction, I talked about ice cream, right? And so we live in a world where people say there's chocolate and vanilla, and people literally cannot imagine strawberry ice cream. And if you're caught up in the definitions, you might have a hard time with chocolate chip ice cream, right? Where it's both vanilla and chocolate. And so if you're caught up in trying to find the right term to decide whether chocolate chip ice cream is chocolate or vanilla, then you're gonna miss the point, right? The point is that ice cream is tasty. And you don't need to know how to categorize all the different kinds of ice creams. It used to be what, Baskin and Robbins 31 flavors or something. There's lots more than 31 flavors now, but you don't worry about knowing exactly what every kind of ice cream is. You want to take your grandchild or your friend to ice cream and enjoy the experience. And so it's worthwhile to do due diligence to learn these terms, but also like enjoy it and have some curiosity about it in a good way of like, I would love to know more about you and who you are.
And that was basically what I was going to say.
Oh, you probably read my introduction.
The definitions that exist for non-binary, genderqueer, agender, gender fluid, whether in a textbook, online, are very much a starting point, not a finite, definitive definition. And what I find more important, as Chris was just sharing, is asking a person, oh, you identify as gender fluid. What does that mean to you? Being open to whatever they will respond, as well as saying, you know what, go read a book or go to this website, and respecting that a person doesn't have to answer that question in the way that we expect them to answer it. But just on a very basic level, what we're starting to see with things like non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, is folks disrupting this binary of male and female, and the definitions are similar but also different. But ultimately, it is creating a space for folks to be outside of a gender binary because they identify as both and or as neither. And what do we do with that, and how do we explore that? And again, you ask 10 gender fluid folk how they define gender fluid, chances are you're going to get 12 different definitions from those 10 people, and just respecting and affirming that. And yeah, I can go on and on about terminology, but also want to be respectful if there are other questions.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring something up, especially because I find that we're so in the now, right? That we forget that we are right now, but the world has been going forever. And when we're talking about these terms, these are the terms that we use today, right? I don't know what we're going to use tomorrow. I know what we have used, right? We have Mohau, we have Fafafane, we have eunuch, we have all of these other indigenous and other people and other language, other tribes, right? The reality of the binary is it really never existed. But in this industrial society, we have forced it because somebody had to stay home, right? And so what we really have to break free of is this new oppression, right? Of how we're really policed and how our bodies are being policed. But these aren't new concepts. We're rediscovering them. We're giving them more words, more name, more life. We're living them in a different way. But I don't want folks to think that this is new, that we're we're Christopher Columbus, right? America was already here. Right? so all we're doing is just discovering a land that has been here, that has been talked about, that has been lived, right? And also when we think about our divinities and we think about, well, God looks like me, right? But also how different as people we look like than our ancestors, right? I remember Jabari and I were buying, he was buying me these candles, and we found a blue-eyed, blonde-haired Jesus. That doesn't fit, right? So we have to remember that we're evolving as people, that we don't look like, we don't sound like, we don't act like how our ancestors have, right? We have in our bodies, in our DNA, directo raverna, straight in the vein, our ancestors living through us, but we're evolutions of them even, right? And so I think to think that all of this is new hinders us from realizing that we've just come to discover something that has been discovered. And
I like the ever-changing thought process of our millenniums, because it continued to advance us into a new way of seeing, thinking, acting, and responding. And that is true with each and every generation of individuals. And what we're discussing here tonight and in our lifetime will continue to evolve and move forward with new language, with new definitions to its understanding and expression. But in the day and age, in this day and age, I admonish that we embrace who we are, love who we are, and the expressions of who we are, and sort of dismiss the negatives that we continue to hear from both ears, and just press forward in our uniqueness, reaching out to those bodies that are like-minded, think-minded, or places that we can even ask questions thereof on any of the gender expressions that are out there, or how one identifies themselves, will enable you to press forward in such a unique and powerful way. Just remember that you are created in the image and in the likeness of our Creator. And that's beautiful in itself. Love it, embrace it, wrap your arms around it, because it's special and unique. And as we said at the beginning of this conversation, no two of us are alike. None of us. We're uniquely made in the image of the Creator. Embrace that.
This has been wonderful.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to me. I love my people.
happy birthday.
I have one more question that I want to ask. I would be remiss if I did not ask this. Some of you have already touched on it a little bit already. So this is both our closing round, because we're coming up on 9 o'clock, and I want to respect people's time. So this is both my ringer question and a closing question. So, and integrate that. All of you who you are. I asked you to bring all of who you are tonight. So the ringer question is, I'm a white student in a university setting, and folk don't necessarily, I'm new to campus, and folk don't necessarily know me. And so I'm going around talking about pronouns and who I am and different things. And sometimes folk, especially white folk, will say, but sex and gender is racialized. I come from a different world, I think, than the people who ask that question, because look at my people, look at my friends here. But I feel like there's an assumption about well, you tell me what you think about that question. If people were to say, but what about race? And maybe my ringer question will be like, well, what about white supremacy? Like, when we talk about gender, what does that have to do with white supremacy, and perhaps even how that plays out in white liberal culture? And say goodnight in whatever way you want to.
Within my community, to hear a question like that, listen, each of us we have our own thoughts and opinions, and they continue to press that upon us. It's a waste of my time and my energy. Because if you cannot understand, and half of this country today is having a difficult time with that very question, and it's being played out as we speak. And it's difficult for them to understand that Black Lives Matter. Oh, Black Lives Matter. Listen, you're not understanding the question simply because my people have been an oppressed people for quite a number of years. And when we continue to see it play out on the television and in our neighborhoods, we're trying to bring to the consciousness of whether it's white society or systemic racism or what have you, that Black lives, like all lives, do matter. You have a right to an opinion. You have a right to your thoughts. But if you don't value and cherish the sanctity of life, human life, young and old, the abilities that we all can interact with one another and achieve great things in society, then you still have some, I use my words, growing up to do. And I don't have time to fool with you. I want us to remember the 27 to date as we recognize Trans Awareness Weekend on Friday, TDOR. Remember the 27 individuals whose lives were senselessly lost. That whether we identify as Black or white, Hispanic, whether we recognize ourselves as Buddhist, Jew, or whatever, that our lives do matter. And if we understand the sanctity of life, we will stop promoting hate. We will stop trying to judge ones because of whom they fall in love with, or how they express themselves or live their lives. We're all on this small planet together, learning how to interact with each other in a way that we can love one another and respect one another and go about the world in which it was designed to be in without racism. Learn to love one another. We can be some good people. I want to thank you all for allowing me. Happy birthday, my dear friend. God bless you.
This is a whole other webinar or series of webinars to take. But to the question of race, sex, gender, my mind immediately went, well, who's doing the racializing and who's doing the sexualizing? And oftentimes it is white folks who are racializing and sexualizing bodies of color, whether it is looking at Hispanic men as these Casanovas or Latina women as spicy, or looking at male Black bodies and female Black bodies, also what we do to Asian Americans, specifically women. And so there is, yes, we can't separate these things, but I think what we as trans people of color, what queer people of color, what women of color, what people of color are trying to do is counter the racialization and sexualization that has been imposed on us and reclaim it for ourselves. And to look at, as Z was sharing earlier, looking to our cultural histories and our cultural narratives that these terms, these narratives have always been there. Different words being used, but that we've been there, and sort of a reclaiming that and a reclaiming of our bodies against white supremacy, and a white supremacy that has sexualized us and racialized us in order to oppress us and undermine us. And so, yes, you can't separate the two, but we're going to bring the two together on our terms, which has been exciting to see the variations of the pride flag. And I'm mindful that is controversial for some folks, but I think it speaks to that we as people of color can't talk about our sexuality or our gender without also talking about our race or ethnicity, our ability, our religious histories. In my case, yes, I'm Latinx, I'm the child of immigrants, I'm flat-footed, I'm bald. And all of that is part of the conversation. And how do we create space to honor that? And I close with, and this came to mind a little earlier, I have a crush on Laverne Cox. I'd own it, I admit it. A squish, perhaps, is the better term. We can get into terminology later. But she talks about how it's not about being a role model to others, but about being a possibility model. And going back to the whole rock star thing, that I hope folks who are watching this, folks who will watch this, can see in all of us possibility, but that folks don't have to pattern their lives after how we've done this, but can see different possibilities and be creative and live into who they are in ways that are authentic to them. And a phrase that came to mind to share is, we talk about we're created in the image of God. Folks have started to play with that. We're created in the diversity of God. We're created in the sound of God, or in the music of God. But we're also created in the possibilities of God, and creating opportunities to live into who we are on our terms, rather than the terms that have been dictated to many of us. Lastly, I think there are a lot of questions, and there are questions that perhaps we can't get to and can't answer. And oftentimes those questions lead to more questions. For many of us, and I will own this for myself, I was raised in a culture where you couldn't ask questions. And the fact that I'm able to ask a question now is a form of liberation and is a form of freedom and transformation. And so I encourage you all to keep on asking questions, even if those questions don't have concrete, definitive answers, but to live into the possibilities that those questions open up.
Okay, I've got to follow that. I will start with I agree on questions. Mr. Paige realized in interviews I often ask a lot of questions. Well, if this means this, what does that mean, right? Because we're trying to get to the roots of happening. And so for me, the question is, how am I being sexualized? How am I being racialized? How am I being profiled? What is the person who is unfortunately in a non-person of color position? Is how are they looking at me? What are they looking at me for? What binary are they putting me in? For me, it's always a risk assessment. Where's my safety lie in this, right? And I'm far enough in my transition. I've been in transition over 15 years. That they look at me as a brown man, which is worrisome, right? Because here I am in that brown situation, that my skin color matters first. What happens because of my skin color is then going to either bring in my gender and sexuality or not, right? And then what happens if this escalates? And then all of my identities are now out in the open. And it's how we're seen. Are you sexualizing me because you want to sleep with me? Or are you sexualizing me because you want to see if I'm on the same level with you? And I noticed that society affirms those like them. The first thing that comes to mind is I was married for a very long time to a white cis lesbian. And when we would hold hands or walk through the store, it was cute, and people were like, "Oh, they're so cute." In my new this new leg of a journey, I have this wonderful 6'3" model of a queer man that I get to hang out with, but we do not encounter the same interactions with society, and it is very sad to me. But that is how, when we look at sex, there are different levels and varying degrees that we're all looking at the same time, right? They're looking at us as a couple, they're looking at us as individuals for various reasons, but it's never about us. That's the thing that I think people don't understand. It's not about, oh, hey, are you happy in your relationship? Are you happy? No, it's about them and how they feel about my gender and sexuality and my identity and my skin color. It's never posed, are you comfortable in what you're doing? It's, I'm uncomfortable with you being here. And I think that that's where we have to bring our humanity back, that it doesn't matter. What matters is I respect you as the beautiful human being that you are. And I don't have to understand your definition of gender fluid to respect your pronouns. And also, I think as queer folks and trans folks, that we also forget to check in with one another, because we know that we evolve and change. Mr. Paige knows I say, hey, quick check-in, where we at? And it's because I have changed and I'm ever evolving. So I must believe that everybody else is changing and ever evolving. And for me to be able to continue to respect my friend, I have to check in to see where they're at today. Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in their new self-discovery, because hopefully we're all discovering something about self every day to evolve and grow. And I think as people, if we can get to worrying about ourselves a little more and everyone else a little less, that we could respect one another more and live more cohesively, and literally just minding our own business sometimes. Right? So I think I just want to close with, as I call it, we're in the apocalypse. And for Indigenous people, it was posed to me in a different way, with another dear friend of mine, Janice Stacy, who said, as Indigenous people, we are in a post-apocalyptic world. This is not the land that our ancestors came from. To us, it is. But now we're going through another one. And the beauty in collectively going through this process, not through colonization, not through genocide, but collectively as a world going through this process, we have an opportunity to make the world we want to see right now. We don't have to go back to business as usual. We don't have to go back to the things that we were doing before that didn't work for us or our bodies. We're now discovering how to redo our work ourselves. And we can choose to continue to push for that as we move forward in this new world. And if we collectively do that, then we will end up closer to the world we want to see. We might not see it in our lifetime as us, but we can at least be a part of that. And that is all that I have in my legacy. And how when I go back to become ancestor myself, that is what I will be looked at, is did I do my part for my tribe? And if we all do our parts for our tribe, then they get to hopefully live a little bit easier than we did. And so I just pray that we collectively go to creating a new norm in which everybody is respected, literally everybody, and every being is treated with the respect that they are divinity, because we are. And a very, very happy trip around the sun, my friend. I love you so much, and I'm thankful every day for you. And this very day, my mom had taught me, always overdo birthdays, because if it wasn't for this day, that person you love would not be here. So I am most honored to spend this day with you in the way in which you chose.
Thank you. Thank you
Happy
so much.
Birthday!
The hardest thing for me, I think, it's been an adjustment in lots of ways to be in higher education again after some 25 or more years. I think the hardest thing for me is that after all of these years in community, all these years of being shaped and formed by the three of you and so many other folk, that I'm all of a sudden viewed as an individual again in a different way, that people can't see the way that you all have shaped me, right? I'm talking about myself now as an ethnic Calvinist and a cultural refugee, and I'm trying to learn as this white person from, I'm trying to learn how to tell my story in new ways, and to explain to folk that I am because you have made me, you and so many other people who have made me who I am. And so what's most beautiful to me about this, the three of you, both as individuals and as representatives of my larger community, on my birthday. This is who I am. And so thank you for honoring me by being a part of my life in that way.
We love you.